I do think that this GameStop Retro idea will live and die by its pricing. Can I go in, buy something for about market value? That is all I'm looking for in a physical location. If this can give that to me, I'll be a paying customer. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Level Up Podcast. I'm your host, Murph, as always, with my good friend, Cal.
Hello, Murph. It's me, your good friend, Cal.
Hi, good friend, Cal. How are you today?
Well, I'm doing pretty good. It's a great Labor Day. Had a great Labor Day, but I'm ready to talk about video games, Murph.
Nice. So today we're doing something a little bit different. We wanted to do something that's a little bit more discussion-based, as opposed to, advice-based. And so there was a topic that had come up pretty recently that both you and I found pretty interesting, and that is GameStop put out a tweet that says the classics are back. New retro GameStops are now spawning near you. And it has a logo with GameStop Retro and a bunch of logos with consoles from the Nintendo Entertainment System all the way through, it looks like, about the Wii U. So no Xbox One or PS4. Those were already covered by GameStop anyway. But basically everything from the Nintendo Entertainment System up through the Wii U, which wasn't always covered by GameStop, specifically in store, is now going to have some select locations carry retro game stock.
Well, that's pretty intriguing. I think of GameStop as a used game store, and they are kind of the mass market version of a game store, but they have always been notably different than many used game stores in that they suck. They stink. Like at best, you could go to one, and I bet you could still find some PS4 and Xbox One games there. But that's before this announcement, that's about as old as it's gonna get.
Yeah, because PS4 and Xbox One were reasonably popular. They just stopped carrying Wii U games, I think a few years ago now, because that console just kind of rolled over and died. And to make way for the Switch, which obviously is doing a lot better, GameStop carries Switch stuff, PlayStation 5, Xbox Series games. So yeah, it is an interesting announcement, right? Because it kind of marks a shift in what GameStop is trying to do, or at least they're trying something out.
I guess they're trying something out because, like I said, they're a used game store in that they do sell used games, but it feels like a lot of their actual trade and success in business has been being a video game store, in that they successfully move a lot of pre-orders and make some amount of margin on that, and sell a lot of warranties on the consoles that they sell used and that kind of stuff, which feels a bit different than the more traditional used game stores. It does definitely feel like a pretty big change of pace, in that they're just actually going to be selling retro stuff when they haven't for a very long time. In the GameCube collecting community, the only time you ever hear about GameStop is when someone's like, guys, can you believe it? I went to my GameStop and they had this copy of Double Dash, and well, they were selling it for $10, because that's how GameStop has handled retro stuff up until now. They just don't want the stock.
Yeah, it's been pretty funky. They have, before this announcement, they have sold some retro stuff online. So if you look at this announcement, it specifically is pointing out hey, we're changing some of our in-store games to be focused on retro gaming, which clearly means that they're trying to push for that, which either means that their online stuff is working and they want to expand that, or it's not working and they are trying other avenues, right?
And is this, am I correct in my thought that, they have had retro games kind of kicking around, but now they are simply consolidating all of those games into specific locations and specifically pushing to have more of a retro game presence? Is that kind of what's actually going on here?
Yeah, they've had some stock that they've been using online, but yeah, it feels like they're putting that stock now in person, in store, to try to draw and attract customers for the in-store customer, which is kind of a bizarre thing to do, because in-store stuff is not doing well with the advent of the internet.
Definitely. And well, this is an interesting conversation that could be had. I think there's the in-store stuff, GameStop has really struggled to stay up with the times, right? They used to kind of be like the big thing, when physical media was, but it feels like the last of GameStop's heyday was like around the PS3, Xbox 360 era, maybe, when like online stores, digital games, like digital copies of games haven't caught on as much, and you kind of had to go and get your physical copies. Well, then GameStop was great because they had the fun pre-release stuff going on, and you could make sure you had your game on release day because they would always have it. And if you wanted a game for cheaper, you could just go into the mall and get it for 20% off or whatever from their used game section. And that was fine and good. But it feels like who has succeeded in their stead since then is the more local shops that, maybe have a lot more expertise in the area, have a wider selection of retro video games. And GameStop, for whatever reason, were like, oh, we're going to be a nerd store. Rather than just a video game store. So, they picked up all the Funko Pops and they've picked up a ton of video game merch and related and all that kind of stuff. That hasn't seemed to go well for them. But what I'm really interested with here is, like I just said, the more local stores that have succeeded, they have the expertise and stuff. GameStop doesn't have the average GameStop employee. I know they're great people and all, but the last time that GameStop tried to do this, GameStop did kind of have like a retro trade-in push a couple of years ago. They tried to paddle around in these waters a little bit, and they very quickly walked it back because a lot of people were like trading in relabeled Madden 99 N64 cartridges with like Ocarina of Time labels on them and getting Ocarina of Time trade value for them. And well, that's not how that works. No. But I think this is kind of it will be an interesting step to take because where the physical stores shine is when they do actually have physical media to sell. GameStop has always kind of focused on selling the newest stuff and used versions of the newest stuff. We don't really need that anymore. There aren't that many sickos like me. Most of my Switch games I like to buy physical. I have a decent amount of PS4 and PS5 discs, even though I don't quote unquote have to, right? But in the world of retro gaming, unless you enter the world of emulators, you do have to have a physical product. That physical product is the only version of that game that exists as a sellable entity. So I feel like if GameStop wants to continue having a physical footprint with physical stores that sells physical media, moving back toward the generation of consoles and video games where you absolutely have to have physical media to sell in a store, that seems like a logical step. It seems better than Funko Pops to me, at least.
Yeah, because that's a good point, that they are a retail company, and they're trying to figure out what in the world are we going to do with our retail locations.
They've tried to sell subscriptions. They've tried to sell a lot of warranty programs, but that stuff just hasn't worked out.
Yeah, and as the industry keeps moving towards more digital stuff, if GameStop continues in the path that it's currently on, it's just going to get worse and worse for them. And they're already not in a great spot. So I think it's, I don't know if smart is the right word, but I think it's a totally understandable thing to go for, saying, hey, we're just going to cut our losses with this new stuff. We know that new stuff is eventually, maybe even completely, we're going to phase out physical media for any new game releases. Hopefully that's not the case, but I'm sure it will be much more niche. So instead, they're going to go to the retro gaming community, which you almost exclusively have to buy physically. Yeah, there's emulation and stuff. Maybe there's some digital stuff that you can buy on the Nintendo Switch if you want to buy a classic Nintendo game. But that's not true for all the games, and that's not true for all the companies. And so trying to cater to that crowd, which we all know exists and is bigger than it's ever been, I think is a reasonably smart move. And so honestly, I hope that they succeed. Mm-hmm. Because I think that having a physical game store that you can go, that you can trade in games, you can get your discs resurfaced, you can physically pick up a copy of a game, say, hey, I would like to buy this, check it out. You can look at that game before you buy it. That's something that you cannot get with online gaming. You cannot get the, hey, I'm going to physically look at this and hold it in my hand, which is surprisingly
nice.
It's really nice. And you feel like it should be a lot more valued than it actually is in the retro gaming community, because a lot of people will just buy their stuff online, and I'm very guilty of that as well. I just kind of like point and shoot in the dark and say, I think this eBay listing looks good. I hope it's in good condition, but pictures are only worth so much. It is not the same as being able to hold the thing in your hand, and you can find issues with it once you actually get the thing in your hand. And that's happened to me plenty of times before. Now, granted, I've also been like, ooh, this is even nicer than I thought it was going to be in pictures. You can get stuff in the other way, but I really, really want to be able to have that experience of, I get up, I go to the store, I find a thing that I like, and I say, look at it and think, this is in good condition, or this is the condition that I want it to be in. Pay for it.
I can like literally look at it. It looks pretty clean. You know, if you absolutely want, I'm sure the employee, well, maybe this is probably more of a small shop thing than maybe a GameStop thing. If you want to, I'm sure they would love to pop it into whatever testing console they have in back to test trade-in games, because they will test every trade-in game. You know, you can make sure that it works. You know, you can give it a good look, right? So yeah, I totally get what you're saying. You can just look at it, say, all right, this is something that I want. I'm going to hold this in my hand. Oh, the case is in good condition. Oh, the manual isn't falling apart. The disc looks good. Nice.
Yeah. Oh, so that is a good point that you make. That this is what I want this GameStop Retro to be.
Yep.
But is it going to be that? Because like you're saying, there's all these things that retro game stores provide as a potential service. They can resurface discs. They will be able to test games because they will have, presumably, like basically every retro game store that I've been to, will have a test suite to be able to test the games before they sell it to you, or before they put it on the shelf, or before they take it as a trade-in. And so GameStop, I don't know how much it realizes how much it's bitten off by doing this, because these are all things that customers have like come to now expect.
Yep.
And if you don't have those things, then there might be some disappointed customers.
Yes, definitely. So, yeah, I think what we can talk about here, before maybe we dig into GameStop a little bit more, we can like contrast GameStop. Like, what is GameStop? If they're trying to do this, what are they up against? We've kind of referenced it a little bit already. And that is what has thrived and succeeded in the scene in GameStop's absence, which is like your local retro video game store. Most, major metropolises at least have quite a few of them. I know that Columbus has one chain of them and has 3 stores, and then there's a couple other ones too. I'm sure there's plenty around you, right?
Yes.
Yep. And then, of course, when I was growing up, my LGS, my Magic LGS, and my local Best video game store were one and the same. So that was a special treat. Shout out to the Gaming Warehouse in Grand Rapids, Michigan. But these stores, their entire business model often, usually with some elements of Nerd Store or whatever on top of it too, are usually like they know everything there is to know about used games. They would love to sell you all the equipment that you need for it, the right equipment. They have tons and tons of games for relative to the amount of games available for the console itself. So they'll have a ton of PS2 games and not very many GameCube games, but that's just how many GameCube games come through the store in trade-in. Dang it. These local stores usually do rely upon having like a continual, loyal local consumer base, customer base. So they are pretty incentivized to take care of you. They're pretty incentivized to help you out, not rip you off. Hopefully pretty incentivized to, be honest. And a lot of the local game stores that I've ended up frequenting also happen to give like really good trade-in value on the games that you may want to get rid of. You go in there and you say, oh, actually, I don't need all of these, Xbox One games that I have right now. I'm going to go down to the local game store, and whereas a larger corporation that will go unnamed during this segment of the show, it has trade-in value so low that it is the butt of jokes, kind of the hobby community over your local video game store. If it's a solid one that likes to take care of people, they may give you depending on the game, like all the way up to like 70% value store credit or something like that, which is pretty dang good. And that's nice. But these local stores, they'll have a lot of stock, and they will often, since that's like their whole thing, and they often, in my experience, also have employees that'll be there pretty long term and are there instead of at other places, often because they are themselves hobbyists who are really passionate about it. They'll be knowledgeable about it. They can help you out with questions that you have. I'm kind of repeating the same points over and over again, but these local stores are specialized, and that is, they know their stuff, and they would love to take care of you, hopefully, because it's a small retail location in a very niche hobby space, and they need you to come back. And that shows.
Yeah, you only have so much reach. My biggest sticking point when it comes to retro game stores, which I'm interested to see how GameStop does with this, is pricing.
Definitely.
Because brick and mortar retail stores, for the most part, from what I've seen, and in my area at the very least, tend to have reasonably inflated prices, even compared to like price charting. Like a lot of places around me will, on the more popular games, be stickered about 15% higher than price charting.
Yep.
Which is pretty kind of a lot, and turns me off from even wanting to go to these stores. Because why would I even want to set foot in these stores if I know that the games that I want to play are going to be more expensive anyway? And I think that's turned a lot of people as well off, which is, again, why the online business of this has kind of like blasted into the stratosphere in popularity among retro gaming enthusiasts.
Yeah, and that is definitely the downside that they do have. It's like, it stinks, but it's also kind of reasonable, right? Because like the price charting in online related space, we talked last episode, price charting itself can be a little inflated, but the person sending you something on eBay usually does not have overhead costs. They are usually someone who's just selling a game they would like to get rid of, whereas a store has staff, it has, it has a retail location, and that stuff adds up, which is like a reasonable reason to have higher prices, but that doesn't mean that we like it.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I understand why you are charging me more, but as the end user, I don't think most of the time I'm willing to pay that extra cost. I'm just not. I'm sorry.
Yep. I think that is a little bit of a difference maybe in between you and me, and that's also something like I have to say a lot of my experience with local game stores is, I think, very Midwestern, in that like actually a lot of the local game stores that I do go to are relatively small businesses that do have a relatively small customer base for their business, because they are in like, especially compared to where you live in the Orange County area, right?
Los Angeles area now.
Yeah,
yes.
Los Angeles. Okay. Look, all of California is just Orange County to me. Sorry, my bad.
It's pretty much the same. It's one big, like, stretching suburbia all the way through. It's not that different.
And then you go you go like 10 hours north, and then there's wine.
Yep. Or you go a couple hours east, and there's desert and nothing but desert. Actually, you don't even have to go that far.
Casinos.
It's like 30 minutes, and then you hit desert.
Go northeast, and there's casinos.
Yeah, exactly.
But a lot of my experience with, I keep wanting to say LGSs, but my used game stores are that actually population density here in the Midwest is not that large. They do have a smaller customer base they really have to appeal to, so they can't get away with as much. And because we're in the Midwest, living costs here are, lower. The cost of that brick and mortar store, the cost of employees is probably going to be lower than it is in comparison to, say, where you live. So that percent markup over this like completely democratized lowest common denominator online market that exists, the markup percent over that, I would imagine, is lower, just because there is a lot less. Those overhead costs may just be lower on these like commodities that do have a very set, quote unquote, like fair market value that's like known by people involved. That their money goes farther here. So I think the markup that I've seen is I've seen some of the costs of games that you've sent me, and they all look about 10% higher than they would be in my neck of the woods. That's for sure. And
they usually are. But again, that's one of the reasons why online just kind of dominates the spaces because I can buy a game from a store, even if it has an online marketplace or an online presence, even on eBay, and then buy it from your game store, and they'll send it to me, and I get that game store prices. Which, to me, it feels like even if you have a game store here in the LA area, you are paying so much for labor and so much for square footage, you have to be maintaining customers. Like you said, like that is the one thing that you just have to be doing. And like, let me tell you a story. So
yes,
I went into this game store, which shall not be named for the purposes of this video, because it was overall a bad experience. I had some games, some extra games that I just had sitting in closets that I wanted to trade in, get a couple things resurfaced, and maybe see if I can get them to work. And so I called them and I said, hey, do you guys resurface? They said yes. So I said, okay, cool. I'm going to come in and get some stuff resurfaced. So I did. I got some stuff resurfaced. And then I went and talked to them, and they're like, all right, now what do you want to do with these? And I'm like, well, if you want them, I would like to sell them to you. And so I don't know what your experience with trading in / selling games to these game stores has been, but how do they go about, like, what is the first question that they ask to you?
Oh, it's like, hey, how's it going?
No, as far as when you say, I want to sell these.
Oh, I want to sell these. Oh, are you looking for cash or store credit?
Yeah.
Then
they'll usually ask you, like, oh, what are you looking to get for these?
Yep.
And then kind of go from there, which puts them in the position of power. And when you're doing any sort of haggling, it can just leave a bad taste in your mouth very, very easily. And so I was like, I don't want to worry about haggling or anything. I know these people have to make money. They are listing these things for about 10 to 15% over price charting. So I know what they're selling these things for. So I'm like, okay, that's fine. No worries. So I went in and said, hey, these games, all I want is about 50% of price charting. And I know I'll make about half, you'll make about half, and then a little bit left over. Totally fine.
Yep.
Right?
Yep.
And I got nickel and dimed at that point. They kept saying, oh, well, let me check with my manager, and then would like go to the back, do exactly the same type of thing at like a car dealership.
Yeah, exactly. They really try to give you like the car dealership. Yeah,
exactly.
treatment.
He didn't go in the back. He had to like message his manager or the owner of the store, whoever it was. And he's like, yeah, he's a little bit particular about the prices and stuff that we have and everything. And I'm like, I'm just sitting there thinking like, bro, this is 50% of price charting. This is half of this game's value.
Yeah.
Like, it is not very much. And so we kind of went back and forth. And eventually the guy was like, I mean, I can do this. I'll give you the resurfacing for free to get you to where you need to be. And so I took that. I still wasn't quite at 50% of price charting even after that. But it got me a lot closer to it, where I said, okay, fine, whatever. I just want to go. I do not want to be here anymore. I do not want to be talking to this person anymore.
Yeah, just get me out of here.
Just get me out of here. And so I did that. And when I left the store, I didn't think, wow, what a cool store. I'm going to go back anytime I need a retro game, anything.
You said, I'm out of here.
I'm never coming back to this place.
Yeah.
And
that
so
makes a lot of sense.
Even if you're like, I cannot imagine that you would be losing money off of this game that you are then going to turn around and more than double the price of and put it on the shelf. Like, there's no way you're losing money. Now, is it as much of the profit margin as you potentially wanted? I don't know. It sounds like you're being incredibly greedy with the profit margins you're trying to get out of people. But this to me sounds like the traditional GameStop experience of you come in and you say, hey, I have this game I want to trade in. And they're like, oh, it's $2. And you're like, I think I'll just keep it then. I don't need $2.
Yeah, actually,
what am I gonna do
don't
with that?
care.
Yeah. So I think that type of experience is something that I'm very wary will happen to this potential GameStop Retro experience.
Definitely.
Which I would very much like to not happen to anyone else.
Yep. Definitely.
It's miserable. It is not an enjoyable experience to walk out of a store and say, I never want to go back there again. And it is bad for the business. I can guarantee you that.
Yep. Definitely. So that's my experiences, I think, as a whole with trading stuff in are a little more less they're more enjoyable than that, at least in that, like, usually it's kind of like they ask if I want cash or trade, and then I hand them the big pile of stuff and they check it out, and then they say, well, how do you feel about X? Like, in a lot of the interactions I've had, they don't, or if they're like, oh, what do you want for it? I usually could be like, I don't know, what do you give me for it? And they like take that as a financer. And then in a lot of times in that situation, they give me a number and I'm like, how about this? And they're like, well, you're going for credit. Why not? And then that's how a lot of my interactions have gone. But I think, like we just said, a lot of my interactions with my local stores have gone more like that. But we can probably, scratch some of that up to my local store cares probably more about me being a repeat customer or whatever than having to get an extra 10% value out of this one trade-in and every trade-in that walks in the door, right? And I think that is like you said, I think that kind of gets at what I think will be the big problem that GameStop runs into here. The GameStop trade-in experience is historically so bad, it's like a joke online. You see all those memes that are like, here I have, I don't know, some outrageously valuable object, and GameStop is like, oh, best I can do is $2. Yeah, exactly. And that, the trade-in experience is not the only experience that exists with used game stores.
True, but it's a very common one.
It is a very common one.
One of the ways one of the things that you want to foster, because that's how you get new inventory, and you are also going to live and die by your inventory.
That's how you get new inventory at a very good rate. Yes, exactly. But that I think that experience does kind of echo throughout the rest of the GameStop ethos and how they just kind of have to approach their business. They are not a local mom and pop shop that cares about retaining you as a customer. They are a publicly traded, quite literally multinational, like, conglomerate that, has to care about every single last cent that they can squeeze out of every customer that comes in the door, because they don't actually really care if you specifically come back. They just need a lot of people to come through the door. And if you come back, that's nice. Maybe we're the only game in town, or, they don't care about you in specific. They just care about 1,000 of me's. Yeah, exactly. And when there isn't that incentive to be hyper knowledgeable about a specific console, like, a specific employee at a game store maybe, or have that wider depth of knowledge about a bunch of retro video games such that you can help a lot of customers who walk in the door. And, you probably don't have employees that have the ability to deviate from the listed number on a judgment call. You don't have customer, I've had the experiences before in these game stores where I'm like waffling between like amiibos or between 3 games that I'm going to get. And they're like, I'll tell you what, if you get the third one, I'll give you 30% off on it. And they get the sale from me every time, and they know they're still making money on it because of the trade-in they got in on or whatever. But like in the GameStop system, I would assume that these employees just don't actually really have that flexibility.
Yeah, the GameStop will oftentimes like kind of balk at even you trying to haggle with them.
Yep.
In the first place.
Because it's just like, I don't know, this is the number that I know I can give you. Sorry.
Yeah.
And all of that boils down to an experience that is not enjoyable. It's not something that one would go to over a more local experience with more expertise. It's not. And all of this is just like assuming that they can overcome the problem they already ran into, where people were just giving them relabeled old N64 games.
Yeah.
So I think, like, I guess a lot of my feelings about this is like, I don't think that I personally can ever foresee myself going to a GameStop looking for retro games unless I like happen to be near a GameStop and I pop in and I say, oh, that's actually not a half bad price on this GameCube game that because GameStop will get a way wider range of trade-ins than many local game stores, that's not something I've seen in a local shop before, and I am going to give it a look. And, now that I'm holding it, I'll pay 15% more on it or whatever than I would sight unseen on eBay. And that's probably the situation where that is actually, let's dig into that. I just thought of that. Maybe one advantage that GameStop will have over a lot of these more local places, if you are someone who cares about, like what you said earlier, if you want to go and buy a game, or maybe even like a more expensive game for your collection, you may want to actually check out the specific box, check out the specific disc, check out the specific manual of the game that you're buying. And there's a very real world that if you go to a GameStop Retro location, they will potentially have a wider selection of games available for you, just because, they're shipping in those games from who knows where else in the country to get a more interesting balanced stock. That maybe, if you go and check that out, there I could find more than 25 GameCube games or something, right? I know that's wishful thinking, but maybe that could be one advantage. They are a large company. They have a ton of stores. If people do start trading stuff into them, they'll have a huge range of things available that could be way larger than whatever would be available to you at your local 3 used video game stores that you have in your specific metropolis. That's interesting.
Yeah, I do think that this GameStop Retro idea will live and die by its pricing plus its inventory. And so the pricing, I'm actually not that worried about, because if you go to like the GameStop website, like I was looking at just GameCube stuff, they have Double Dash for the GameCube listed for $65, which seems pretty average. Mm-hmm. Like, that's not bad.
No, not
like,
bad
am
at
I
all.
crazy here? Now that's assuming it comes with
think...
the case, which it
that's like not
to
too
be.
bad at all, really, in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, so I think that their pricing is not too far off the mark of where it needs to be competitive. So I think that inventory is going to be the biggest thing. And one thing that's... do you know Mark Nestico of Dynamo Nestico Collectibles?
Yes, I do.
Yeah, so this has been a guy that's been around in the Magic space for a while, and he currently has his own store, video game store, in Florida. He did an interview with Phoenix Resale where he was talking about like all the pitfalls of owning a like video game brick and mortar store and how hard it is. And it is hard. It is difficult to do. But one thing that I really thought was interesting is that he was like, yeah, what I care about the most is moving inventory. If my inventory is sitting there,
X numbers, yeah.
Yes, if my inventory is sitting there, I am not making money. I have to be moving things. And so he'll do these things like say, hey, I'm looking for specifically Pokemon games. He does that a lot because Pokemon games are always like hot moving items. They're very popular. Yep. So he'll sell them for market value and give a decent price on trade-ins. And is not making a ton of money on Pokemon stuff, but he is moving that inventory.
Yeah, he's getting sales in and he's getting sales out, and he's making money on it, even if it's not a huge margin.
Exactly. And so the more that you can do that, the more you can avoid these potential problems of, hey, I have this GameCube game, like I have Double Dash, for example, and I put it on the shelf, and I know it's going to be pretty popular because that's a popular GameCube game, so I'm going to jack up the price a little bit more. Well, then it's going to sit there for longer. Are you going to find a buyer for that? Yeah, probably eventually. But if you do that with a lot of your, like, the games that people want, the popular games, the ones that people are probably trying to come to the game store to get, if you're trying to deflect and say, hey, yeah, you can get it, but it'll be a little bit more than what you were hoping for or expecting, even past the potential, like, tax per se for it being a brick and mortar store, then that also turns people off quite a bit.
Yep.
And so I think that being able to have that inventory of popular stuff at reasonable price and having at least a selection of people to browse, of games for people to browse through, will be very important. I'm also interested to see if, because the way that GameStop oftentimes works is you can get the case on the shelf and then you have to go up to the desk and say, I'd like to buy this, and then they'll pull the disc out.
Yep, and then you
And
can
so,
check it
like,
out if you want, maybe.
exactly. Like, will they even have the cases on the shelves? Will they have the cases and the manuals on the shelf, or will that be behind the counter? So I'm interested to see like the overall customer experience for these types of locations.
That is the like one true downside that my local beloved store that I go to, that I took you to.
Yes, it was nice. That was way better than any game store that we have here. Like, I'll tell you that right now.
Well, that's good. I took Murph when Murph was visiting me recently to play at Trade It, which is a small chain of local stores. They have 3 locations, and the vast majority of their stock is video games, but they do also have like DVDs and Blu-rays, and now some like vinyl and that kind of stuff. A lot of that kind of like physical media that people will trade in and then buy, right? That trade in and selling is definitely their model. But even they have 3 locations. They do great trade-ins. They even have like they'll put out a calendar every week, and they're like, all right, this Monday, N64 games are 20% more trade-in. On Friday,
Exactly.
all Legend of Zelda games are 20% more trade-in, all that kind of stuff. They do a lot to try to encourage that because moving stock of good, right? But even then, they have 3 stores. They do their best to kind of balance the stock in between the 3 stores, and they will have, when I go in there, they'll have like sub 30 complete in box GameCube games at their largest location. And it's just because, like, number one, they just operate within the realm of Columbus, Ohio, which is like a quite well populated area, but it's not that dense, etc., etc. And there's, like we've said a lot of times on this show, there's not that many copies of GameCube games out there in the grand scheme of things, right? So hey, maybe I should do some more of my GameCube shopping at a GameStop Retro moving forward. I can't wait to go into a GameStop Retro show for sure. GameStop Retro store for the first time. They're going to be like, yeah, I think we have like 15 PS2 games over there.
Yeah.
But I can hope.
Yeah. I am like very interested about the selection of consoles that they have listed, because it seems like pretty complete and stuff. But they list things like Sega Saturn games. Like, bro, do you know how hard it is to get Sega Saturn stock? Those cases break all the time. Nobody bought the Saturn, so the games just end up being quite expensive. Like, when I went to your local video game store, the fact that they had like 10 Sega Saturn games complete,
I know, that was kind of impressive, like, right?
Wow,
hey, yo.
that's insane. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, they probably won't have a great selection of that stuff, but it seems like that's something that they'll at least consider for potential inventory or for potential trade-in, which is nice. The one big omission that I noticed is one that's kind of near and dear to my heart. Where's the PlayStation Portable?
Did they not list that on the list?
They list the Vita. They list the PlayStation Vita, but they don't list the PSP.
Look,
why?
They know that the modding scene is too cracked for the PSP. Murph.
People mod the Vitas just as much as the PSP, so why do you care?
I know. I'm kidding.
Like, you are right. That is, it's either they didn't have enough space, thought nobody would care enough, but the PSP was a big system. It sold like, I think, 90 million-ish units. That is not nothing. That is a lot of stuff.
Not nothing at all. No, it was pretty big in its time.
Yeah. And so I love going to retro game stores and just like browsing through just a collection of UMD discs. And you're right, because of the like how common it is for people to mod their PSPs, the game prices are not that expensive. But it is very fun to go through and be like, ooh, here's this cool game, Sid Meier's Pirates or whatever for the PlayStation Portable. Sure, whatever, $5, I'll pick that up.
Yeah.
Just something to throw on the shelf and just something to have. It is cool, and I'm a little upset that they omitted it here, but honestly not that upset because I wasn't going to play it from UMD anyway.
Yeah, but it'd be cool.
I know, it would be cool.
Well, Murph, I guess all of this to say, will you be attending The GameStop Retro opening? The GameStop Retro opening near you? I don't even know if that's a thing.
Yeah. I mean, there are some that are branded, quote unquote, as GameStop Retros, which I'm pretty sure, as it stands right now, they have a corner of retro stuff.
Yeah.
From what I've seen online.
Yeah.
From what I've seen online, that is what people are doing thus far. Okay. So this might be part of a bigger rebrand. Maybe the actual physical location will be called GameStop Retro as the logo exists on the tweet that GameStop made. That's my guess, but it will definitely take some time in order to get there. Mm-hmm. So I think this is just something that they're like slowly trying to roll out and trying to drum up interest and hype in order to get people to visit their locations.
Fair enough, I guess.
Yeah.
More power to them.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to say cautiously optimistic. I'm cautiously like curious.
Yeah.
And a little bit hopeful. One thing that I don't want it to do is I don't want it to crush mom and pop retro video game stores.
I think that's definitely like the worst possible outcome is them being successful, meaning that there is a great reduction of business from all of these smaller stores, which then messes stuff up.
Yeah. Like, at least for here, I don't really see that happening. But, I mean, it is possible. But, to be fair, I don't really like any retro game stores in my area. I have not found one that I have really enjoyed, like the one that's close to you. A lot of them also kind of gets eaten up by... you've heard of Frankensons, right?
Indeed.
It's this giant collectible show that happens like 3 times a week. And I'll go there because they usually have very good prices on Magic product. Mm-hmm. Even though, once again, we keep saying we're not going to mention Magic stuff, and we keep mentioning Magic. Here we are again.
Look, it's our shared context that we have together.
I know. But, yeah, their video game stuff is also just as expensive, if not more expensive, than the dedicated retro game stores in the area, which is insanity.
That's just kind of insane.
Like, I get that it is a popular location, and you get a ton of foot traffic. But, I don't know. There's just... I'll go and look at games. The one thing that I bought from Frankensons was... I think we talked about it here. It was it was either the very first episode, Wavebird wireless controller with a receiver, because it was about market value, and I could see it, and I saw it was in good condition, and so I bought it. Like, that is realistically all I'm looking for in a physical location. Can I do that? Can I go in, buy something for about market value, and say, this looks good, I'll take that.
Yep.
Right? So if this GameStop Retro can give that to me, I'll be a paying customer. But if they can't, and make me walk out and say, you know what? I really did not enjoy that experience. I never want to come back here ever again. Well, I think you know what I'm going to do at that point.
Yep. Exactly. You're going to say, I'll take your entire stock.
Entire stock? Speaking of which, does this mean that we're going to buy GameStop stock, or we're selling GameStop stock?
I'm not going to comment on this complicated topic at this time. Well, Murph, I've said all I have to say about GameStop Retro. I keep wanting to say Game Boy Retro. I don't. I've said all I have to say. Yeah,
Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Light.
I was going to say Game Boy Light. I thought you were going to miss that one. I had to reference that one.
I somehow missed the color, Game Boy Color, which is probably one of the more popular ones, but whatever.
Well, I guess that means we have to move on to our one and only recurring segment here on Level Up. Murph, do you have any recent pickups?
I do, and it was kind of a doozy. So, my very nice, very fun retro scaler, the XRGB Mini Framemeister, started dying on me. So it started giving me like this little hiss whenever output stuff. I tried swapping HDMI cable. I tried swapping all of the cables in between that and any other system. It's just the thing itself, the unit itself. I don't know if it's wear on any of the ports or anything like that, or anything internal, but it's giving me a hiss It's not the worst. You can only hear it at like certain audio levels, but it was enough for me to be like, you know what? I've had this for about 9-ish years. I think it's time to get something a little different. And so instead of being a reasonable person and going and getting like the RetroTink 5X Pro or something like that, the $300 one, I went and got the RetroTink 4K scaler.
Oh, brother.
This is the $750 top of the line, best you can possibly get that money can buy retro video game scaler. So why is that expensive, and what does it do? So it has basically any port that you could ever want or need. It has composite as video, component, RGB SCART. So this thing can scale any classic console to any resolution up to 4K that you want and do a ton of stuff to it while it's at it. So the thing that sucks about classic consoles is they output analog video. And analog video is finicky. Every single console basically wants something slightly different. They have slightly different settings that makes the ideal picture output. Slightly different resolution output settings, slightly different aspect ratios, yada yada. Even if they're both outputting 480p, like the original Xbox outputs 480p for basically everything, and the GameCube has a lot of stuff that outputs 480p. I have two different profiles for them because they want to be treated ever so slightly differently. So that's the nice thing about this that the FrameMeister also did, which I liked, is that it has savable profiles to an SD card.
Yeah, that's pretty sick.
And so you can say, hey,
very convenient.
Here are my settings for the original Xbox. I'm going to save it to this profile. I will name it Xbox, and I will assign it to this button on the remote. Also comes with the remote, which is very nice and handy. And so then all you got to do is you fire up your original Xbox, turn on your TV, and then press the button. And then it loads the exact perfect profile for that system. And so I've set basically everything that I want. I spent most of today and yesterday trying to get everything all looking nice. One thing that I really appreciate about this is that it has very good CRT mask emulation and very good fake scan lines. Like, I used to be somebody...
Yeah, I know that you've said that, like, you've never seen fake scan lines that you've enjoyed actually looking at before.
Yeah, I used to be somebody who was like, fake scan lines are stupid. Why would anybody ever want this? It looks dumb, it looks bad, it just makes the image darker. So one thing that I've really appreciated about this thing is that it can inject the HDR color space into any old video game console. So you can take an N64, operate that bad boy with HDR10 color space, and then add scan lines. So HDR10 makes the image a heck of a lot brighter, and then the scan lines will bring it back down to a much more reasonable brightness level.
Yeah, that combo of HDR plus scan lines does honestly sound so sick.
It's really sick. Now, I haven't tested this with my capture card, so I don't know if it works with my capture card, but if it does, I will put it on the screen for all video viewers.
And for full context, too, I assume it does also really help that you have an OLED TV.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
which does make those, like, HDR, like, highs and lows that much more, like, you know, evident.
Yeah, because then you do get, when the picture is black, it is black, which can cause some issues with certain games, and it'll make some things, like, kind of splotchy. Like, the PS2 does not go well with HDR, is what I've noticed. There's way too much stuff that just gets, like, the blacks get crushed way too much, and so you lose detail, which is, or might be very crucial to you playing through a video game. So that's the only one where I have HDR turned off. But the PS2 is just an enigma when it comes to video output. It does weird and random things, and for seemingly whatever reason. It needs the most love and attention of any of these video game consoles that I have. So it has its own profile, but so does everything else. So I will continue to play with it, run it, do testing, but so far all of my impressions of it have been very positive, which I should hope so, considering this thing's ridiculously expensive. Could I recommend it at this price? I mean, if you're willing to spend the price,
If you're a real hobbyist, you'll do
Yeah.
it. That's
Yeah.
my understanding.
exactly.
Situation.
Like, can you get away with less? Absolutely. You can spend
1000%.
less than
Yeah.
half of the cost of this thing and still get a good picture.
Yeah.
But this will give you the best.
Yep.
And so,
Definitely.
as hobbyists, I at least wanted to try what the best was.
Yep. Definitely. That makes a lot of sense. That sounds pretty sick, Murph.
Yeah.
I'm happy that you're happy with it. Happy
Thanks.
that I could convince you to make another, I don't want to say like
Bad decision.
like objectively poor decision,
It might be objectively poor.
but it's pretty awesome.
I mean, I will be happy with it, probably, but yeah.
I just had to convince you to buy it, so when I inevitably come out and visit, hopefully like in late October or something, I can just be like, well, that is pretty awesome. Guess I'll have to save up for one myself. And then Jen, my wife, will be like, what are you talking about? You are never spending $750 on something not named a Panasonic Q ever again.
That's what you got to do. You just got to build up like a collection of games or something that is that cost, and then you can say, "Oh, that's fine. I'll just like sell these games or trade in these games to get it."
I'm selling these games.
Exactly.
I'm selling these games that I totally spent $0 on, so I'm profiting a pure $750 to spend on my own RetroTink 4K.
If it's not cash right out of your pocket, it's not real money. That's how it works, I think.
Exactly.
We are
Murph.
bad at enabling each other. Because of that,
So right.
Cal, was there anything that's I enabled you to buy, or you bought of your own volition?
This definitely more of my own volition. I just have one small pickup. I don't even have it for show and tell because I already have it installed and I don't want to dig it back out. I have said time and again, like the GameCube and retro video game modding scene in general is kind of becoming awesome. And one of the latest examples of that is there is now a aftermarket Ethernet broadband adapter emulator for the GameCube. Actually, I believe developed by the same person who made the Pico Boot mod for the GameCube, which has made modding GameCubes much easier. So there are two products that they have made. There is the ETH2GC Sidecar and the ETH2GC Lite. They're both just like different versions of the same thing. The Sidecar is just like a little bit nicer, and it like makes the Ethernet cable plug in much like backwards. It points backwards toward the back of the GameCube, so your cable can just plug in and go away rather than coming out the side like the original broadband adapter does. The light just pops out the side. But just to check it out, I picked up the Sidecar for myself. It's a little pricey. It's just like, I think $50 maybe, which is definitely pricey, but that is much, much, much cheaper than a real GameCube broadband adapter is at this time.
Yeah. Which are 130-ish?
100 plus. Yeah, I don't remember. Like the number in my head is $100. It could be accurate or it could be not. So there's just like some small downsides to this. It does require you to use the Serial 2 port of your GameCube, which is only on the first model of GameCubes, the DOL001. That is the only GameCubes that will have the Serial port number 2 on them. And you also have to be not already using your Serial port 2 for something else. That is becoming less of a problem now, but a lot of the early easy mods for GameCubes use the Serial port 2 for a little tiny device that'll hold your SD card for your like ROMs or your homebrew, all that kind of stuff. But
does that port have easy access to the motherboard? Is that way?
I'm not actually 100% sure. I would guess that is the case. Like I would guess that's just like I'm not exactly sure why they don't use like, the basal broadband adapter port or whatever.
That seems like it would make the most sense, at least to me.
I
use
would
the
agree.
broadband port for the broadband adapter.
I almost would go so far as to say that this was made because there are like a lot of other ongoing projects for that port. Like one of the most hyped up projects upcoming for the GameCube is the M.2 loader, which is a M.2 hard drive adapter for the broadband adapter slot. Whoa. So you can just put a whole M.2 SSD drive into the bottom of your GameCube.
That's sick.
I think a lot of people have not bothered messing around with the broadband adapter slot because they know that everyone who's serious will just have an M.2 loader in it. But that's a good question. I think the Serial 2 port may just be like where Swiss knows to easily look for stuff, or Swiss being the main homebrew for the GameCube. But I'm excited for it because, number one, if I really want to, it'll let me, number one, they're now being, the ETH2GC Lite is $20 like shipped, or like maybe $25 shipped. That is not super cheap, but that is much more affordable than $100 a pop if, say, you wanted to do something like a double dash LAN party, which is something I would love to do. I have the GameCubes for it. I have the controllers for it.
Same.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you have 2 copies of Double Dash for it?
We'll work on that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm in the exact same boat as you, where I'm like, I have 2 GameCubes and I have all the controllers I could need for setting this up. I'm missing an extra copy of Double Dash, and I'm missing the 2 broadband adapters. Yeah, but they're just so expensive. It's hard for me to be like, you know what? I'm gonna go plop $200-$300 on 2 broadband adapters to be able to do this one thing, maybe a couple times.
Yeah, maybe a couple times. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So this does make it readily more available for me to accomplish my dream, and it does also, I do have a lot of like ISOs, ROM copies of my games and that kind of stuff, and together with the homebrew Swiss, if I have those ROMs stored on another like physical location on my network, like a computer, or I am currently building a media server to house such things, I can just like stream the ROM over my local network through the Ethernet port, and I'm looking forward to that. Just for when I'm feeling real lazy.
Yeah. So the one thing that I was talking to you about this, and I was saying, oh well, this seems like a great thing to have. What are the potential downsides? And I was like, well, do you have to use Swiss with it? And you said, yes, you have to use Swiss with it. And I was like, oh, well,
so you do have to have a modded GameCube, and it does have to be a modded GameCube with a Serial 2 port, which does greatly limit the use cases for people.
Yeah. And in order to like boot into Swiss, you don't technically need a modded GameCube. There are like some
there are other ways to do
boot tricks and stuff. You can use an action replay. I use there's like a Wind Waker boot exploit that I use to boot into Swiss, and that's how I play my Game Boy Advance games without the Game Boy Player disc. That's what I use Swiss for. But it is kind of a pain, and I don't have that option. Like, then I have to buy another copy of Wind Waker or something else to boot for the second GameCube. And at that point, well, am I really saving money?
No.
Not really.
No, not really at all. It's like, yeah, if one of your GameCubes was modded already and could just boot Swiss from a disc or from an SD card that was not in the Serial 2 slot, then it would like greatly reduce the cost because you would only need one real broadband adapter.
Yeah.
But you know what? This is very much a thing for me. I'm very excited to have it. Me buying it has been the impetus I needed to, like, I'm making a media server so I can store a lot of stuff. I have a lot of physical media that I want to sit around that I would love to have readily accessible on my network
and just archive as well.
Yeah, setting on like my multiple 10 terabyte drives, right? But I have also in the past, put the Ethernet. I've gotten like the Ethernet hookup from my PS2. The Xbox has Ethernet, and my Xbox is, homebrew modded. My PS2 is homebrew modded. So like, if I really wanted to, I could very quickly have like a diskless retro setup up here just for the fun of it. Like, I don't even know if I would use it that much because I do, I own a lot of physical discs for my games because I enjoy that. Like, I don't emulate for a reason. I just enjoy the physicality of it. But it would be another cool thing to do because I can. And why else are we doing this, I guess?
Yeah, just something neat that's for fun. I like that a lot.
Exactly.
But probably not for me.
Exactly. Not for you, Murph. And when I'm doing all of that, when I'm hooking all of that up, when I'm snapping together all these Ethernet cords, I'm going to say, wow, this is such happy gaming.
Happy gaming, everybody. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
Bye.